What a week we had last week. Okay. On Friday, just a couple of days ago, the stock market took a nosedive, not because of inflation, not because of interest rates, but because President Trump announced plans for a 100% tariff on Chinese goods. Now, I want to talk to you on this video about what this means for your wallet here in 2025 and in 2026. Now, I'm going to break down to you exactly what happened, what it means for us as consumers, and how this whole thing ties into the ongoing government shutdown. And I'm going to give you a little bit of news about federal layoffs and why life seems to be strangely normal for a lot of Americans, even as these major shifts are happening behind the scenes. Now, that single statement by President Trump to impose 100% tariffs on China rattled the global markets last week on Friday. It spooked investors and it sent the stock market really tumbling down, all of the major indexes, right? And while the headlines are focused on Wall Street, this story about these tariffs on China is really about Main Street, us, because tariffs like these, they can reach straight into our wallets. So let's jump into it. Now, I want to break this thing down to you in plain language so we can all get it. Now, first, let me spend a minute or so talking about the government shutdown and these layoffs that are happening. The U.S. government has been in a partial shutdown since October 1st. Congress has failed to pass the 12 appropriation bills or even pass what's called a continuing resolution or a CR. Now, as a result, hundreds of thousands of federal employees have been sidelined, right? Here's what that looks like in real numbers. Roughly 900,000 federal employees today are furloughed, and another 700,000 are still working, but they're not getting paid. Now, listen, there's only a little over 2 million federal workers in America. So the rest of the federal workers are still working and they're exempt from this layoff, which means they're working and being paid because the money that pays them their salaries is not tied to those 12 appropriation bills that have not been passed and funded by Congress. So just in this past week, we saw that the IRS furloughed about 34,000 of their employees, nearly half of their workforce, which means for us, right, slower tax processing, jammed up phone lines, and it also means delays in every corner of that agency, of the IRS, right? October 15th is actually a big day at the IRS because it's the last time that you can do late filing. So that can bring some problems for some people. And then came the bigger headline, which was over 4,100 workers that are now being laid off permanently through a RIF or a reduction in force plan. Now, agencies like cybersecurity and infrastructure security, those agencies, CISA, they were among some of the first that were hit with these permanent layoffs. So this shutdown, the government shutdown, it's not just about missed paychecks anymore. It's turning into structural cuts inside of the federal government. Now, let's talk about Trump's China tariff threat and how the market, the stock market, actually reacted to this news. On Friday, just a couple of days ago, President Trump came out and announced his intention to impose a 100% tariff on all Chinese imports coming into America, beginning on November 1st. That's still several weeks away. Now, President Trump said that this was a direct response to China's new export controls on some of the rare earth minerals like the cobalt and the zinc and the copper, right? And some of those precious metals. Now, these are materials that are essential, guys, very important for everything from electrical vehicles, EVs, to smartphones, to even fighter jets, right? In his remarks, and on social media, President Trump called China hostile and said the U.S. must fight back with stronger trade measures. So he even suggested canceling an upcoming meeting with President Xi Jinping and tightening up some of these export restrictions on American technology being sold to Chinese firms. So the reaction in the stock market was pretty much immediate. You had the Dow Jones going down by 800 something points, nearly 1.9% in a single day. You had the S&P 500 on Friday falling 2.7% in one day. And then you had the NASDAQ, which the NASDAQ is heavy with tech stocks, and they rely on Chinese manufacturing, a lot of these businesses that are in the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ dropped by 3.6% on Friday. And so altogether, that made this past Friday one of the worst single day drops in the stock market in 6 months since that big dip we had back in April. You had tech giants like AMD, the big giant NVIDIA and Tesla. All of those took a brunt of the sell-off, right? Because here's the deal. These large tech companies, their supply chains run straight through China, right? Think about that for a second. The supply chains go right through China for big tech. Meanwhile, we got US-based mining and rare earth companies that actually rose and had a good day on Friday, right? So what's happening is this, guys. Investors are betting that a tariff problem or tariff issue could boost some of the domestic producers here in America, which is what the intent of tariffs is, right? To boost up your own domestic production. But the big takeaway for me was this: the panic and the fear that dropped in. The panic and the fear that happened throughout the stock market on Friday was huge. Now, listen, the stock market literally hates uncertainty. No one had really priced this in, this 100% tariffs on Chinese imports. Nobody had priced that in. And so the market reacted with a big downswing. Tariff talk instantly raises uncertainty, and it instantly raises the possibility of a potential trade war with China. But here's why this matters for us, because I want to talk to us as regular consumers, right? We need to know how this is going to affect our wallets. So let's bring this thing down to us. What does a 100% China tariff mean for us everyday Americans? So let me explain it like this. The total value of imports coming into America from China last year was about $438 billion. In a percentage, that means that roughly a little over 13% of all U.S. imports that came into America last year were coming from China. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's a lot. It's a huge amount. Now, the top goods that were imported from China are things like electrical machinery, mechanical appliances, games, toys, sports equipments, right? Anything using plastics, right? Those are some of the big ones that come from China in terms of being imported to America. So the number one way this is going to affect me and you as consumers is higher prices on stuff that we typically buy, regular stuff, our electronics, our TVs and our cell phones, right? Our appliances, our tools, again, our toys, clothes. Most of these things either come from China or they include Chinese parts. Now, if those imports from China the cost of them suddenly double, you have retailers and you have manufacturers that are going to try to absorb some of that in their cost, but sooner or later, and ultimately, the prices on these things are going to go up, right? Just flat out. Guys, if you're getting anything out of this video, do me a favor and smash that like button below. Also, please share this video with your friends, your family, and your network of people. And don't forget to drop that comment below. I want to hear from you. Now, let's get back to the video. The second way this is going to impact us as consumers is supply chain slowdowns. See, companies are going to rush to stockpile goods before November 1st. When these tariffs may kick in, if they actually kick in, right? That's another whole story. But shipping lanes are going to clog. Suppliers are going to scramble to reroute goods through another means or another country besides China. And that means more shortages, more delays, and more, when you go to the store, more things going to be out of stock. And think about it. Okay, Christmas is coming up. We're in October. In 2 months, we got Christmas shopping that's going to happen. And right before Christmas, 100% tariffs on imports from China, that's going to have an effect on us. So, hey, and I know you're saying, well, it's just Christmas. Listen, that's a big season for a lot of businesses, not just us as individuals. So let me say this, do your Christmas shopping now. It's just a thought, right? Before November 1st gets here, just in case. Now, the third way that this is going to really affect all of us is inflation pressure. Is going to last longer. Look, we've already been fighting persistent, sticky, what we call sticky inflation for years, for the past several years. Many countries have. But these tariffs are going to pour like gasoline on the fire, so to speak, on the tariff fire. And it's going to force the Federal Reserve into sort of a tricky spot. Because if the Federal Reserve raises rates again, right, there's going to be a risk of recession because people are going to stop buying as much. Or if the Fed could hold the rate steady when they meet again in a few weeks, right? They could hold the rate steady and then watch prices slowly begin to rise again. Because again, inflation is higher than the Fed wants. Or the Fed may say, we're going to cut rates again here in October coming up. And if the Fed decides to lower the Fed funds rate again, coming up in a few weeks, guess what? That could cause higher inflation faster. Because when the Fed lowers the Fed funds rate and the rates on these short-term loans, people tend to spend more. And when people spend more, demand goes up. And when demand goes up, prices go up. So cutting the rates is sort of inflationary. And so if the Fed decides to cut the rates, that could make prices go up faster, right? And that's called higher inflation. So it's a really tricky spot for the Fed. Now, another very important way that these 100% tariffs on China could affect us and our wallet is weaker consumer confidence. See, when people hear about the rising cost and falling markets, people tend to pull back their spending. It's really a natural reaction, right? People begin to spend less when they get a little bit nervous or panicked or scared. And what happens when people pull back their spending, it affects small businesses. It affects large businesses. It affects restaurants. It affects service workers. It affects all of these other parts of the economy when people lose confidence in spending money. So all of that has an effect ultimately on businesses, and businesses are what makes up the stock market. So all of this has sort of a trickle down ripple effect. When the consumer loses confidence, it affects a lot of things. And there are a few potential winners. Here's a few potential winners from this thing. Domestic manufacturers could benefit. And that is really the whole purpose of tariffs, right? To benefit people that make stuff right here in America. So they could come out ahead on this thing if these tariffs really go through. But for most families, tariffs mean higher prices typically, and down the road. It may not happen immediately. And so if you're buying big ticket items, TVs, phones, home appliances, bicycles, whatever, in the next few weeks could be your last chance before prices jump. Let me just say that. Now, here's how the shutdown and layoffs feed into the bigger picture, okay? Because all this stuff really is tied together. The federal shutdown really shows how fragile Washington, D.C. really is. Agencies can pretty much halt or stop overnight. Essential data that we get from agencies, right, that large institutional investors rely on, small investors like me and you rely on, policymakers, Congress relies on, all that data can stop in a heartbeat. So if you add to all that a trade war threat, stock market volatility like we saw on Friday, and then top it all off with thousands of layoffs inside of the same federal government system that millions of Americans depend on a regular basis, what we're watching here, guys, is a situation where we have supply side pressure, which is tariffs and global friction and the cost of imports going up, supply side pressure conflicting with demand side weakness. Now, what is demand side? Fewer paychecks, people having less money to spend, fewer government workers. We're talking hundreds of thousands of government workers, and more uncertainty about income. That really supply side pressure, demand side pressure is really not a healthy combination for the economy. It's really a recipe for slower economic growth. And remember, many of the people losing pay or losing jobs in a government shutdown, they live in communities where the federal employees and the federal government drives a lot of the local economy and a lot of the local businesses. So you see a lot of small businesses getting hurt in this whole thing. Yeah, we talk about the workers, but there's small businesses also that are out there that are missing, right? Furloughs, layoffs, they all have a ripple effect on restaurants, food trucks, right? Gas stations in the area, car dealerships, and a host of other small businesses. All these places are negatively impacted. So let me just give you this disclaimer. While everything looks great on the surface, right? Your stocks were doing well before Friday, stocks were doing well, and everything feels normal on the surface, there's a lot of stress that's building underneath this thing that we should not turn a blind eye to. We should pay attention to what's going on underneath the surface. So we need to be aware as consumers and investors. And that's one of the reasons why I come on and do these updates so we can talk about this thing in plain, easy to understand language, not the biased, one-sided CNN version, not the biased, one-sided NPR or Fox News version, but a version that cuts right down the middle and speaks to us as consumers, speaks to us as investors. And it's not trying to play a political game with our minds and lie about this and then lie about that and propaganda this and propaganda that. Next thing you know, we don't know who to believe or what to think because it's all biased. We need to look at the facts. And that's what I try to bring you right here on these updates is the facts. And then we can make up our own mind because we're smart enough. So that's a good segue to talk about what we need to be watching and what we should be doing. First, understand this, guys. Right now, this is still a tariff threat, right? This 100% tariffs on Chinese imports. It's just a threat at this point. It's not a signed order. And implementation of this could move fast if the White House chooses, the executive branch, right? Or it could move slow and be delayed like we've seen with some other tariff threats. Sometimes these threats of tariffs are more leverage in negotiations than they are something that's going to actually happen. And we have to understand that. Also, we got to look for any legal challenges, trade partner negotiations, or even a sudden deal all of a sudden out of nowhere that hits the news cycle, right? And these things could soften or delay this tariff threat to be down the road sometime. But the risk is still real, right? And that's why we're talking about it, because the risk is still out there. If China happens to retaliate, say within the next few days, right? And they say, you know what, we're going to ban exports, or we're going to place higher tariffs or higher taxes on U.S. goods that are being imported into China, then we're back in a full-blown trade war or getting close. But here's what I want you to keep in mind. Earlier in this video, I told you that in 2024, America imported around $438 billion from China. Well, in 2024, in that same year, China only imported to China $165 billion from the U.S. That's called a trade imbalance, right? China has a significant trade surplus with the U.S., meaning, in other words, China exports sales far more to the U.S. than it actually imports for or buys from the U.S. A lot more, right? About 2.5 times more. So sometimes I think people don't realize the imbalance that occurs with other countries in terms of trade. And that's a big piece that I think most people don't talk about enough. What is that imbalance? Why does that imbalance occur? Why does that happen where China is exporting 400 something billion? We're taking in 400 something billion of China goods, but China's only importing 100 something billion. Why is that, right? Those are conversations we need to know more about. Here's something else you got to keep in mind in the next coming weeks, right? Are there any formal proclamations confirming that 100% tariff on China imports that are supposed to be starting on November 1st? We know for a fact that this could change in just a matter of a moment. But again, be looking for China's response, be it verbal or economic. Key inflation and production reports that once furloughed workers finished compiling, let's pay attention for those things if they're able to come out, right? Also, it's earnings season for a lot of companies. So listen for companies in the next few weeks discussing how they plan to handle any potential cost increases due to these tariffs or these threats of tariffs. Also, you want to look for any progress or any lack of progress in the reopening of the federal government, a deal potentially being struck. Pay close attention to that. It could happen at any moment. For the everyday consumer that's out there, there's a few practical steps and a few practical things that we should be doing as consumers. If you need a major purchase right now, or you want to buy Christmas gifts right now, you might want to consider doing it before the tariff clock really starts, okay, on November 1st. Also, maybe you want to look for goods that are made or manufactured right here in the U.S. when possible. Like, don't beat me up for what I'm about to say here, right? But I'm old enough to remember when Buy America was not seen as a bad thing. Buy American used to be seen as a good thing, helping out American-made domestic businesses and helping out the economy right here in the country. There was a time when that was okay. It wasn't a bad thing to say. And I'm saying maybe we need to bring that back so you're buying things domestically that aren't affiliated with a higher price that may bump up in the next few weeks. If you live in India, there's absolutely nothing wrong with concentrating buying things that are made in India. If you live in any other country of the world, it's okay to buy things that were made in that country or wherever you live. That's not a bad thing. Focusing on American-made products if you live in America is okay, in my opinion. Again, don't beat me up. Somebody's got to say it. The other thing we want to think about is tightening up our personal budgets. Inflation spikes have a way of creeping up on us, okay, when we least expect it. So everything goes up in price. Let's not get this thing twisted, right? It's just a matter of, is it going to go up fast or is it going to go up slow? When things go up in price slow, that's low inflation. When things go up in price fast, that's higher inflation. But everything's going to go up. Things don't go down in price. But also, let's keep this in mind. If you're a federal worker or you're a contractor with a federal government contract, stay alert to updates about pay, about benefits, about on all the legal rulings that may come out, the lawsuits that may be coming out regarding these layoffs. And more importantly, guys, for all of us, let's stay informed. Stay connected to this channel because I'm going to keep you up to date. The U.S. economy right now is really walking a tightrope, guys. Growth has looked steady on paper, but it's fragile. Right? Inflation, yeah, it's cooled off from where it was a couple of years ago, but inflation hasn't vanished. It hasn't gone down as fast as they wanted it to go down. And the government is the single largest employer and spender in America, in the country. It's partially offline right now. Now, layer on the fact that the potential trade conflict with the world's second largest economy, China, that's tough. That's a lot going on, right? So this time the stakes are a little bit higher. We've seen what happened to the stock market on Friday. The combination of government shutdown, federal layoffs, and new tariff shock, it's not just a story for Washington, D.C. that you see on the 5:30 news on ABC, NBC, CBS. It's a Main Street story for all of us to pay attention to. It affects how much we pay. It affects how confident we feel. It affects how we plan for the next few months ahead. When you put all that together, we're looking at a period of looks good on the surface, but there's volatility underneath the surface, both economic volatility and emotional volatility for a lot of people. My advice is don't panic, just prepare, pay down debt, build your cash reserves, purchase your bigger ticket items now or just wait to purchase them. Stay flexible with your spending if you can. If this quick breakdown helped you understand what's really happening behind the headlines, let me know in the comments below. And listen, if you want to go deeper, visit smartmoneybro.com. On my website, that's where I share my newest course called The 4 Steps to Maximize Your Money. Just simply click on the first link in the description box below and you'll get there. I also do one-on-one financial mentoring and coaching for those that want that. That link will be in the description box below as well. Because what I try to do is I try to introduce real-world tools to help you take control of your money and build wealth with intention. Make sure to smash the like button on this video. And more importantly, share this video with other people who may need to hear this information and want to stay informed. Guys, the best person who's going to take care of that old you is the young you. Take good care of yourself and take care of other people. Until the next video, peace.